the kind of man who carried his bitterness like a badge. In one rough hand, he dragged his daughter by the wrist. "Come on, you worthless thing!" he shouted, his voice cracking across the street like a whip. "Time somebody else dealt with you." The girl was Martha Brennan, 19 years old, thin as a fence post and shivering in a faded dress that wasn't near enough for the cold. Her hair hung loose around her face, dark and tangled. She looked like she wanted to disappear into the snow. "She's deaf!" Josiah bellowed, turning in a half circle to face the people now peeking from their doors and windows. "Deaf as a stone and dumb as a post! Can't hear, can't talk, can't do nothing, right?" More folks gathered. Merchants, miners, even Mrs. Fletcher, the preacher's wife, clutching her shawl as she whispered to her friend, "That poor child." But no one moved to help. They never did. Josiah swayed on his feet, breath thick with whiskey. 19 years I fed this burden. 19 years of shame. Her ma died birthing her, and for what? He gave Martha's arm a hard shake, making her stumble. She didn't cry or fight. She just looked down at the frozen ground, her lashes heavy with melting snow. "So here's what I'm doing," Josiah slurred, spreading his arms wide. "I'm giving her away. Free to anyone who'll take her." A few men laughed, others looked away. Young Tommy Morrison, the blacksmith's apprentice, started to step forward, but his master pulled him back. "Don't be a fool, boy. That's family business." Josiah grinned bitterly. "She can cook some, clean a little. Don't talk back neither. Perfect woman, ain't she?" The crowd laughed again, uglier this time. Martha's eyes stayed down. She could feel every gaze on her, every whisper. Though she couldn't hear them clearly, she knew what they said. She'd seen their mouths move like that before, words like shame and burden and crazy. $5, Josiah shouted suddenly. "I'll throw in $5 to whoever takes her off my hands." He fumbled in his pocket, waving a crumpled bill like bait. People shifted uneasily. Even in a rough mining town, there were lines a man wasn't supposed to cross. Selling your own daughter, deaf or not, was one of them. Then, from the edge of the crowd, a low voice said, "Enough." Heads turned. Out of the swirling snow walked a man who looked carved from the mountain itself. He stood tall, near 7 feet, with broad shoulders wrapped in a buffalo hide coat. His long, black hair was streaked with gray, and his face bore old scars that made him look both fierce and noble. His eyes were dark, steady, and cold as river stone. He was Apache. Everyone could see that, and everyone stepped back. Josiah blinked through the haze of drink. "What do you want, Injun?" "This ain't your business." The stranger stopped a few paces away, eyes fixed on Martha. His voice was quiet, but it carried through the wind. "I know you can hear." The words hung in the air. Martha's head snapped up, her eyes wide. For the first time, someone had seen her secret. Josiah barked a laugh. "You're crazy! She's deaf! Can't hear a thing!" The Apache's gaze slid to him, and for a heartbeat, the air itself seemed to freeze. "You offered her to anyone," he said calmly. "I'm anyone." A ripple of shock went through the crowd. Even the sheriff standing by his office door looked uncertain. "What's your name?" Josiah demanded. "Samuel Crowfeather," the man replied. "Most just call me Crow." Josiah tried to laugh again, but it came out shaky. "Well, Crow, she's no good to you. Can't talk, can't hear, can't—" Crow reached into his coat and pulled out a leather pouch. He poured its contents into his palm, 10 shining silver dollars that caught the dim winter light. "You asked 5, he said. "I give 10 for the disrespect." The crowd gasped. Real silver, more than most folks saw in months. Josiah's greed won over any hesitation. He snatched at the money. "Fine, she's yours, Apache. Take her and good riddance." He shoved Martha forward so hard she nearly fell. Crow caught her gently, steadying her with a hand that was rough but careful. She looked up at him, startled by his touch, by the calm in his eyes. "Her things?" Crow asked. Josiah snorted. "What things? The dress she's wearing is all she's got." Crow's jaw tightened. "Then we go." The sheriff finally stepped forward. "Hold on now, Crow. You can't just buy a person." "Even if her own father throws her to the street?" Crow asked. His voice was soft, but it carried the weight of judgment. "Where were you 5 minutes ago, Sheriff?" Cooper's mouth opened, then closed. He had no answer. Crow turned back to Martha. His hands moved in shapes. "Sign language. You decide. Come with me or stay. Your choice." Martha's breath caught. No one had ever signed to her before. Not in this town. Not anywhere. Her hands trembled as she replied, "You know signs?" "A friend taught me. He signed back. He lost his hearing to war. Said hands can speak truth when words cannot." Martha's eyes filled with tears. All her life she'd been treated like a burden, a mistake. Now, a stranger spoke to her as if she mattered. "Why help me?" she signed. Crow hesitated, then answered, "Because I know what it is to be seen as less than human." The crowd watched, uneasy, not understanding their silent exchange. "Will you come?" he asked one last time. Martha looked at her father, already pocketing the silver, at the people who had watched her suffer and done nothing, then at Crow, who stood tall and patient, offering not ownership, but freedom. She nodded. Crow's expression softened, just slightly. He took off his heavy buffalo coat and wrapped it around her shoulders. It swallowed her small frame in warmth. As they turned to leave, Josiah shouted after them, "Martha, come back! I didn't mean it." But she didn't look back. Crow helped her onto his painted horse. She sat sideways, clutching the coat close, her cheek against the fur. As they rode out of Silver Creek, snow began to fall harder, erasing their tracks. Martha didn't know what waited ahead. Danger, kindness, or something in between. But for the first time in her life, she wasn't being dragged. She was being led. And, somewhere deep inside her, a spark long buried began to warm again. The trail up Bear Mountain wound through dark pines and deep snow, the kind that swallowed sound and left the world still as breath held too long. Martha sat wrapped in Crow's heavy coat, her fingers gripping the saddle horn as his horse climbed higher. The town lights vanished behind them until only the pale moon guided their way. For hours, neither spoke. The only sound was the crunch of hooves and the slow rhythm of their breathing. When they finally stopped, it was before a cabin tucked into the side of a rock face, half hidden by snowdrifts and tall pines. Smoke curled from the chimney, and light flickered behind frosted windows. Crow dismounted first, moving with easy strength. He reached up to help her down, his touch steady, gentle. "Wait," he signed. Then he opened the cabin door, stepping inside first like a man making sure it was safe before letting someone precious follow. Martha hesitated on the threshold. She had never been inside an Apache man's home, but what she saw made her breath catch. The cabin was small but warm and tidy. A fire burned in the stove, casting a golden glow over wooden shelves lined with tools, books, and carved figures. Animals of every kind, wolves, eagles, deer, were carved so lifelike it seemed they might move if she blinked. Herbs hung drying from the rafters, filling the air with a soft, earthy scent. Crow set down his rifle and gestured toward a chair near the fire. "Sit," he signed. "You are safe here." Safe. It was a word that had no place in Martha's life until now. She sat stiffly, afraid even to breathe as he moved around the room, adding wood to the stove, melting snow in a pot, pulling down 2 cups from a shelf. The cups were delicate, painted with blue flowers. They looked absurd in his scarred, powerful hands. He poured steaming pine needle tea and handed her one. "Drink, it warms." She hesitated, then took it. The warmth spread through her fingers, her chest, her very bones. After a while, Crow went to a trunk in the corner and opened it. Inside were folded clothes, simple but clean and carefully kept. He lifted out a soft gray wool dress and a shawl woven in patterns she didn't recognize. "These belong to my sister," he signed slowly. "She died 5 winters ago. You wear them. She would want that. She nodded, unable to form signs back. He turned away politely, giving her privacy to change behind the hanging curtain. The gray dress fit surprisingly well. It smelled faintly of cedar and lavender. When she stepped back out, Crow had set the small table with dried meat, bread, and a pot of honey. They ate in silence, but it wasn't the painful silence of her father's house. It was full of peace, an understanding that didn't need words. "How did you know?" she signed after a time. "That I could hear?" Crow looked at her thoughtfully. "Your eyes," he signed. "You turn before sound touches you. You flinch before a man shouts. You listen, even when pretending not to." She blinked, startled. "You watched me?" "Twice a year," he nodded. "I trade in town. I saw you last summer behind the store. Your father struck you." No one stopped him. Martha's hand stilled. She remembered that day, the taste of blood, the shame. "Why didn't you help?" she signed. Crow's answer came slow. "Because it would have made things worse for you. Sometimes waiting is the only way." He rose and went to a shelf, pulling down a small box. Inside lay a folded paper. He handed it to her. It was yellowed, but neatly kept. Certificate of citizenship. Samuel Crow Feather, Scout Corps, 7th Cavalry. "You worked for the Army?" she signed. "For a time," he nodded. "Thought helping them might help my people. I was wrong. Still, I learned things. Reading, English, wood carving, patience." She looked around at the cabin again. The order, the care. It spoke of a man who had chosen peace after too much war. "Why did you really help me?" she signed softly. Crow studied her, then crossed to a shelf and picked up a small carving, a bird with a broken wing bound by tiny wooden splints. He placed it in her hands. "Found this little one hurt," he signed. Most would say let nature finish, but sometimes broken things just need a chance to heal. Martha's eyes filled with tears. Her fingers brushed the wooden feathers. "I'm not broken," she signed fiercely. Crow smiled, a quiet, gentle smile that changed his whole face. "No," he signed, "just caged. There's a difference." He began to prepare a bed near the fire for himself, laying down blankets and furs. "You sleep in the bed," he signed firmly. "It is yours now. You're safe here." That word again. Safe. She held on to it as she lay down on the soft, pine-filled mattress, warmth from the stove wrapping her like an embrace. Through the half-light, she watched him settle near the fire, his broad shoulders bent over a piece of wood as he carved. The slow, rhythmic scrape of his knife filled the quiet. For the first time in years, Martha didn't dream of escape or fear or shame. She dreamed of a man's hands moving like language, of a cabin in the snow, of a life where silence didn't mean loneliness. When morning came, light poured through the window, golden and clean. Crow was already up, coffee brewing in a blue pot. He handed her a steaming cup, his smile small but real. Days passed, and she learned the rhythm of the mountain. They gathered firewood, fetched water, set snares for rabbits. Crow taught her how to track prints in snow, how to read the wind. His hands taught what his voice rarely did. At night, they sat by lamplight while he read aloud from old books. His deep voice was steady, the words simple but rich. Sometimes he would stop and teach her to sign the new ones she learned. "You're a good teacher," she told him one night. He chuckled, a low sound that felt like thunder held back. "You are a fast learner." Their eyes met in the flickering light, something unspoken lingering there. Gratitude, maybe, or the beginning of something deeper neither dared name. Outside, snow fell softly against the window. Inside, warmth and silence wrapped around them like a promise. 2 weeks passed on Bear Mountain, and in that quiet time Martha found a rhythm she'd never known. Each day began with the hiss of the stove, the smell of coffee, and Crow's calm presence moving around the cabin. He taught her everything the mountains had taught him, how to lay traps, how to tell a storm by the taste of the wind, how to survive when the world turned hard. But what she learned most was how to live without fear. In the evenings, they read by lamplight, his deep voice tracing over the pages of old books. Sometimes she'd sign the words as he read them, her fingers catching new meanings with each page. He'd watch her hands and smile quietly, proud of her hunger to learn. Still, the peace they'd found couldn't last. Winter on the frontier never let a good thing rest too long. It began the morning they rode down to Silver Creek for supplies. Martha wore Sarah's gray dress and shawl, her hair braided the way Crow had shown her. She looked different, stronger, steadier, but as soon as they entered town, every eye turned their way. Whispers rippled through the street like cold wind through dry grass. They stepped into Henderson's general store. Mrs. Henderson's face twisted into something sharp when she saw them. "Well," she said loud enough for all to hear, "look what the wind blew in." Crow ignored her. He gathered flour, salt, coffee, necessities. Martha followed silently, her back straight, though she felt every stare. When they reached the counter, Mrs. Henderson slammed her ledger closed. "That'll be $2. $40. She said, then added with false sweetness, "I do hope the young lady knows what kind of arrangement she's entered into." Martha's hands clenched around her shawl, but before she could answer, Crow laid the money down with quiet finality. "The lady knows exactly where she is," he said, voice low but carrying, more than some can say. They turned to leave, but the door swung open before they reached it. Silas Boone stood there, flanked by 2 other men, his usual companions full of swagger and arrogance. "Martha," Silas called out, "you don't have to stay with him. The church will take you in. You can live decent again." Crow stiffened beside her, but Martha stepped forward. Her voice, rusty but steady, carried through the store. "I can hear you," she said, "every filthy word you've ever spoken about me." The store went silent. Silas blinked, confused. "You can talk?" "I always could," she said firmly, "but no one ever cared to listen." The color drained from his face as she continued, louder now, so the watching crowd could hear. "Where was your decency when my father beat me half to death? Where was the church when I starved? Where were any of you when he tried to sell me like cattle?" People shifted, looking anywhere but at her. "This man," she said, turning toward Crow, "has shown me more respect in 2 weeks than this town has in 19 years. He speaks to me. He sees me. He treats me as a person, not a burden." Mrs. Fletcher, the preacher's wife, had stepped from the crowd. "But child," she said softly, "people are talking. They say that he's made you his woman." Martha felt the heat rise in her cheeks, but she met the woman's eyes steadily. "He's made me nothing. For the first time in my life, I'm allowed to just be." Crow came beside her then, tall and calm. "We're done here," he said, but Silas wasn't finished. "You think this is over?" he snarled. "You can't live up there with him forever. It's indecent. It's against the law." Sheriff Cooper had been watching quietly from the doorway. Now he stepped forward, his voice weary. "No law's been broken, Silas. Leave them be." But Silas's pride couldn't handle defeat. 2 weeks later he came back, with 20 armed men. It was near midnight when Martha woke to the sound of horses outside the cabin. Crow was already standing, rifle in hand. Through the window she saw torches flickering like angry stars. "They've come," Crow signed. "Stay down." The men fanned out in front of the cabin. Silas Boone's voice carried through the cold air. "Crowfeather, send her out and we'll let you live. We ain't letting this abomination go on." Crow stepped out onto the porch, rifle easy in his hands. "Go home," he said calmly. "There's no fight here unless you start it." "You bewitched her," Silas shouted. "We'll burn this place down if we have to." Inside, Martha's fear hardened into anger. She'd lived too long under other people's judgment. She flung the door open and stepped beside Crow, her hair loose, her eyes blazing in the torchlight. "You want me?" she shouted. "Then come take me." The men hesitated. This wasn't the meek girl they remembered. This was a woman who'd found her strength. "You think he bewitched me?" she said, voice rising. "You think he turned me against you with some magic? No. He taught me to read, to survive, to live. The only magic here is kindness, and that's something you'll never understand. Riders didn't understand the gestures, but her confidence terrified them more than any weapon. "She's cursing us!" someone shouted. Horses reared, snorting and stamping in panic. "Enough!" Silas raised his rifle, but Crow's voice cut through the chaos like a blade. "Point that gun at my wife again, and I'll end you." Silas froze. So did everyone else. The word wife echoed through the clearing like thunder. Crow stepped forward slowly, his eyes never leaving Silas. "You came here for blood," he said, "but all you'll find is your own. Leave. Now." For a moment, no one moved. Then Harold Garrett, the blacksmith, turned his horse. "Come on, boys," he muttered. "This ain't right." One by one, the others followed, torches vanishing into the trees until only the snow and silence remained. Martha's knees gave out. Crow caught her, pulling her close. "That was dangerous," he whispered. "Everything worth doing is," she said, voice trembling. "We can't stay, can we?" He shook his head. "They'll come again." Quote, "So they packed before dawn, supplies, pelts, food, and rode west toward a future uncertain but free. They didn't make it far before Sheriff Cooper found them." His face was drawn, eyes heavy. "Josiah Brennan's dead," he said quietly. "Fire in the saloon. Before he died, he confessed something. You've got family back east, wealthy. They've come for you." Martha's heart sank. "What do they want?" "To take you home," Cooper said, "without him." His eyes flicked to Crow. "They say they'll give you everything, a proper life." Crow said nothing, but Martha saw the tension in his jaw. Later, by the fire, he signed, "You should go. Start new, I'll understand." She reached for his hand, fierce and certain. "No, I already started new, with you." The next morning, she met her grandmother and aunt in the sheriff's office. They offered fine clothes, education, and a name she hadn't used in years. Martha Whitmore. She looked at them. Two women who had sent money to ease their guilt but never loved to ease her life, and shook her head. "I'm staying," she said. "My place is with him." Quote, her grandmother's face hardened. "With a savage?" Martha smiled. "With a man." That night, as she and